I was so obsessed with impact, but I sacrificed my family.
This week on MaxLife, what if the secret to scaling wasn't more control, but less? Aaron Marcum shares the mindset shift that saved his business, his marriage, and his sanity. This is the journey from control to clarity, from pressure to purpose, and how you can follow it.
Your positive psychology, your proactive awareness now has kind of brought to the forefront of the other lies that we as entrepreneurs tell ourselves that like this is important.
I talk about in my book, the lie of the either or. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I was living this lie is that I didn't think I could thrive personally and professionally. I had to choose one. Where do you get your confidence?
My greatest confidence is when I finally surrender to the fact that like I am such an incredibly imperfect human. And the fact is that if I just give myself that grace and I actually lead with the vulnerability that I wish other people would lead with, that is actually where a majority of my confidence has come.
Burnout isn't about how many hours you work. It's about the energy you're getting from what you're doing.
I'm curious, you said something. I got a payout that was maybe bigger than I should have gotten it. So why should people be listening to you, and why do you feel that this positive psychology and this special culture you built allowed you to get a bigger payout? And if you don't mind, like, was it 2x?
10x. And I went in with one purpose, and that was to find out why some entrepreneurs thrive and why they don't.
Welcome to the MaxLife podcast. I'm your host, Ben Laws, and today's guest, Aaron Marcum, brings a deep dive in what does it mean for human connection, especially not only his role as an entrepreneur, an author, or a research and expert in human connection, but more importantly, in his identities as a man, a father, team leader, teammate, and in essence, human. What you're really going to understand is that burnout is real. It's a burnout in terms of when we look at any of our identities, when we look at our role as an entrepreneur, it is something that is always lurking right around the corner. Not only does he actually tell us about his own journey, he will help us figure out not only how to outline it, but to identify what those signs are that of burnout. But more importantly, we all have these identities. We have these seasons of life that we go through as entrepreneurs in each one of our identities, whether you're a mom, dad, you're like a sibling, a friend, a teammate, that these identities go through these periods where we actually diminish and then we have to reinvent them. And he helps us really understand and outline what does it mean to actually grieve them, and that it's actually not something to avoid. It's actually part of the transformation. I think more importantly, what you see throughout the whole episode is his ability to understand what is human connectedness. And as I like to joke, he has a PhD in positive psychology, or which you'll understand why in the episode. Again, if you like what you see, you love what you hear, remember to like and subscribe for more MaxLife podcasts. Welcome to the MaxLife podcast. I'm your host, Ben Laws, and today we have a dear friend of mine, Aaron Marcum. Aaron, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you on.
Great to be here, Ben. Appreciate you inviting me. And yes, we go back a bit. So excited to talk with you.
I was thinking about introducing you as the man, the myth, the guy who has a PhD in positive psychology.
That's right.
Which, so for the audience, it's a little inside joke, is that Aaron actually has a master's in positive psychology. But for whatever reason, when he first told me that he had gotten his master's in positive psychology, all I heard was PhD. And by the end of this conversation, you're going to realize why I actually think that he actually has a PhD in positive psychology. And so,
Yeah, and that's how Ben introduced me to a few people. Is that this Aaron has a PhD in positive psychology, applied positive psychology. So, yeah.
I mean, I'll just lay it out there. I didn't even know that this was like a real thing. I thought this was maybe like a weekend warrior course. Like, this was like you go and you go into the wilderness and you come back. But no, this is actually a legit field of science that, quite frankly, is probably about 100, 200 years overdue?
Oh, way overdue. It's the proactive side of psychology, been around about 30 years. And my program was actually at UPenn. So, Martin Seligman is the father of positive psychology. He's the top psychologist, the last couple decades, and he started the movement along with a couple of his fellow professors, Chris Peterson being one, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi was the third. So if you're familiar with Mihai's name, Flow, he wrote the book Flow. They're considered the founders of positive psychology, and it's all about the proactive side, meaning not waiting for a problem, right? Typical psychology, behavioral psychology, but it's actually getting in front of it and finding out why some people thrive and why some people don't. And so it's a fascinating field, transformational for me, honestly. So
Yeah, talk a little bit about what led you to actually go and actually get your master's in positive psychology. Because for many of you who maybe don't know, Aaron is like a stalwart. He is like a central figure in the home care space. If you're in home care, it's so he's like Kevin Bacon. You ask somebody, be like, "Hey, you know Aaron Marcum?" And they're like, "Oh, well, I don't know him, but I know someone who knows him, right?" And I mean, so obviously, Aaron, you know, you were wildly successful, but talk to me what led you to say, I actually want to go and 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 basically launch on this journey.
yeah, my story kind of starts back. I mean, obviously, I started my first company in 2002, been an entrepreneur since, and it was a home care agency. And I halfway through that journey is burned out. I was going in at like coming home, being with my kids. I have 6 kids, and I had 4 at the time, and so
Positive psychology PhD right there, my friends.
so I should get a PhD to go on the wall right behind me. But yeah, so I just became so fascinated with how do I personally get over this and thrive and overcome burnout. Started doing a lot of my own research. Found that's back when I discovered eMyth. I became certified in eMyth mastery, and then fast forward a few years, I started this data analytics company that really changed an entire industry. And I'm not just saying that lightly. We raised the quality of standards for an industry we had, kind of like JD Powers for home care is the best way to describe it. But even halfway through that journey, I lost my way and lost my um, just myself. I became what positive psychology calls obsessive passion versus harmonious passion. So
Ooh.
obsessive passion is when you're just at any cost, you're going to do whatever it takes to grow your business. And often that's at the cost of your own personal well-being and thriving. I was 30 pounds overweight. This is about 2015. And in 2016, I had a good mentor who came up to me. And this led me right into positive psychology. Is he's passed away since. And his name's Dale, and he said, "Aaron, you look terrible. You're not you're not looking good." He was actually an investor in our company at the time, so he had some skin in the game. And he said, "You've got to get this dialed in." So I did. I got into cycling, I got into other things, but I found this book back then, I think it was 2017, The Happiness Advantage by Sean Achor. So good. And that was my first intro. He talks about positive psychology back then. I got introduced to Martin Seligman, not personally, but to his work, and knew and found the UPenn program, but I was a busy CEO, and I didn't actually start that program until I fully exited from that business. And it was so fast. I was like, what do I do next? And I thought, you know what? I really want to learn more about this. And I had created a special culture based upon what I did learn in positive psychology, even before the degree at my last business, that allowed me to exit at higher than I probably would have otherwise. And so I was just fascinated with it. And so I got into the program. Didn't think I was going to get in. Very hard to get into that program. Hundreds apply. They accept about 38, 40 people. And I went in with one purpose, and that was to find out why some entrepreneurs thrive and why they don't. Like the burnout, really focused on the entrepreneur, which led me afterward to write that book, On to Thrive. So that was kind of the journey to where I found myself here. So
Yeah. Yeah, Aaron, I've always been a person who loves compelling outcomes, and it's sort of a good call to action of like why people should listen to you. I'm curious, you said something. I got a payout that was maybe bigger than I should have gotten it. So, why should people be listening to you, and why do you feel that this positive psychology and this special culture you built allowed you to get a bigger payout? And if you don't mind, like, was it 2x?
10x.
It was 10x bigger. It was a 10x bigger multiple like payout.
10x bigger payout in such a short period of time from 2016 to the time I exited 2020. And we opened our doors in 2008. And if you look at it was a hockey stick growth between 2016 and 2020 because I got out of the way and I learned how to let and trust my leaders, my team to really take over and 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 focus on their own personal purpose. I started being more interested in who they were and what they wanted out of the business. I became a lot more selfless, and even in equity and in the thing in getting people more involved. I definitely spent more time on my personal health than I had otherwise, and I lost in that 2016. I lost like 30 pounds, I think, around there, 25, 30 pounds. It was acceleration. And it was whole, Dan Sullivan books, his book, 10X is easier than 2X, is I found that to be absolutely true, is I just accelerated my growth by making these critical changes to me personally, the way I led, the way I communicated with my team, the compassion I gave um, to my team, and also I had on the team just an amazing second in command leader that wanted me to live my best life and supported that, and that was critical. So
Yeah, can you go deeper in? Let's double click a little bit, Aaron. And I love if you actually gave Aaron before and Aaron after. So give me some of these things that you were able to put in culturally, like specifics that, like giving them more control, being more selfless. Can you give me both sides of like the Aaron before versus the Aaron that actually got the 10x outcome versus the Aaron who said, I want the 10x outcome, but I'm going to be probably behavior that maybe a lot of entrepreneurs can assimilate with.
yeah, yeah, the Aaron before 2016, I loved control, and not just I don't know if love is the right way to say it. Addicted to it, addicted to it. Yeah, addicted to control. I had trust issues. I felt like if I didn't do it, it wasn't gonna get done the way I wanted it. I had a team in place, and they were more lack of a better term, I don't want this to come out the wrong way, is I treated them more like I treated them well. It's not like I was this this mean person or anything like that, but in hindsight, I treated them more like puppets, like they were just I called on them when I needed them and to help grow this company. And I was not leveraging their unique ability. I also use the term called guiding genius. They weren't really being not just leveraged right, but they just weren't as happy. And I was dealing with turnover back then. I was losing members, and I also was keeping people on longer than I should have. Like I had some of the wrong people. But personally, I was again the obsessive versus the harmonious. I was so obsessed with impact, with changing this industry because I knew I saw this vision. I'm a visionary. I saw the vision of what we could do and the impact, which is great. I think that can be healthy, but I sacrificed my family. I sacrificed just so much back then. It gets me emotional thinking about it because I had very young kids that were not getting the attention of their father. And they've turned out great. They've turned out to be good kids, but you hate to have regrets, but back then I was so obsessed with my business and impact and changing an industry. that it was not harmonious. There was no alignment. I talk about in my book the lie of the either or. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I was living this lie, is that I didn't think I could thrive personally and professionally. I had to choose one, and I choose professional. And I had that good mentor, Dale, who shook me up. He was the kind of guy that I would, if I wasn't at the gym at like 4 or 5 a.m., I would get a picture of him at the gym. Right? So, where are you? And it's people like that in my life. There are a few people like Dale that just pulled me out of of where I was at and said, "Aaron, you have got," even my fellow integrator COO Eric helped pull me out of that. Said, "You've got to get in control of your own life." So that was the before Aaron. Hard time letting go. Hard time really seeing uh, the above the trees, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Aaron, I want to just before you share like the post, Aaron, why do you feel that is a lie that entrepreneurs tell themselves that it's a either or? It's either this or this. Why do you think that that is such a seductive belief or like tractor beam?
Yeah, and honestly, they 99% of the time, they pick the professional side, and the way it's a tractor beam is because they tell themselves that, "If I just keep pushing more effort in here, eventually I'll have enough money, or I'll have enough time to invest in my personal side. I'll deal with that later. It's my business that's gonna make that possible," and that's a lie. I learned that that's a lie, that you have to do it now. You have to create that now, or burnout isn't about how many hours you work. It's about the energy you're getting from what you're doing.
Ooh.
And so we especially as entrepreneurs, we burn out because we're doing things in our business that are sucking our energy. I was involved in things that I had no business being involved in. I was speaking all over the country at the time. I was building my own PowerPoints back then. And at the time, if you would have asked me, "Aaron, are you pretty good with PowerPoint?" I would said, "Yes, I'm pretty good at PowerPoint." In hindsight, I was terrible at PowerPoint. When I found someone who was really good at PowerPoint, again in 2016, I had a marketing manager that was in front of he'd been working for me for years. He could have been building my PowerPoints for for quite a while, and they were so much better. I create an outline, and then he would build the PowerPoint, and it saved tons of time, and just little things like that that I just was that were draining me, and I didn't like it. And so that's, again, we're living that lie, thinking that eventually we'll catch up, right, with our personal self.
Well, that makes so much more sense. In the green room, Aaron and I were talking about how we both live in places that are, our gateway to the rest of the world are these tiny regional airports. And Aaron had made this comment of, he goes, like, I'm almost not necessarily really proud to admit the fact that I'm a million miler with one airline. And Aaron, you're the second person that I've heard kind of talk about this like mixed bag, right? A million miles on an airplane. That's a lot of miles. I happened to be on vacation with my wife Jenna, and they came over the loudspeaker, or the intercom, and said, "Hey, welcome to like all of like our Diamond Medallion members, and we'd like to welcome like so and so, who is a 2 million miler." And everyone applauded, and she was sitting right next to me, and I looked over and I said, "Hey, congratulations." And she goes, "Yeah." And it almost, you could just feel and see the regret on her face. And she goes, "This represents a lot of missed time." That's what she said to me.
Really? Wow. Yeah. Oh, I can relate.
And I mean, she was, I think, clearly like in her 70s. Um, and it's so interesting because, I think when people get into it, it's this seduction of the, hey, I'm traveling, I'm being busy, I'm being productive. What do you think the other lies that your positive psychology, your proactive awareness now has kind of brought to the forefront of the other lies that we as entrepreneurs tell ourselves, that like this is important, when the reality of is the simplicity of, like, for example, you don't get your daughter, like, for example, my daughter just turned 4 years old, and she's transitioning to a different room as my next child is set to be born here. And
Oh, congrats. That's great.
thank you. And you realize you don't get that time back, right? Yet we go, yeah, but if I could just get the next million, right? And we will sacrifice. What are the other lies that have kind of percolated that you maybe experienced in this breakthrough in 2015, and as you launched into this new outcome?
Yeah, there's a theory. I don't want to get too complex here, but there's a theory, and I'll keep it simple, called self-determination theory. And it's made up of three factors. Autonomy, like we're more determined when we have autonomy, relatedness, not just in our relationships, but that we can relate with people that we work with. And I call it confidence. In the research, they call it competence. And so you could interchange those a little bit. But the lie a lot of entrepreneurs tell themselves, that first one, the autonomy, is that one that they some entrepreneurs on one extreme will say, I'm the only one who gets that in the company. Everyone else is, needs to be dialed in, available at my beck and call or whatever. And I think a lie of how you use your people. I don't know if you could phrase that as a lie or not, but they kind of had these blinders on how autonomy should be used. But the research shows that when we have more autonomy, goes down back to Dan's four freedoms a little bit, right? Is when you have more autonomy in the workplace and that freedom to figure out the how in what you're doing, then you're far more not just satisfied, but you're more joyful in your work. And so entrepreneurs who are holding on to that, again, going back to that lie of the either or, and they're holding on to things and they're afraid of letting go, and they're lying to themselves that they're good at something that maybe someone's actually better at than them even, right?
Yes.
They're robbing one of the key core pillars of self-determination in the process of their people. So I'd say, I would say that. And then another lie goes with the second one, like relatedness. We lie to ourselves that maybe we're, if we're owners or entrepreneurs in the company and we have several people who are working for us, we see this in the home care space, something that I'm really trying to change the dynamics of. And I even did back when I had Home Care Pulse, my data analytics market research company, is we would get feedback from these care professionals who are receiving care in the home. And the number one reason they wouldn't recommend employment to their friends and family is the way they were being treated by their supervisor, and that they couldn't relate basically with the people that they worked with. And so entrepreneurs being able to be true partners, right, in the people they work with, and figuring out solving problems together. And it doesn't, the lie I think a lot of entrepreneurs might have in their heads, maybe it's even subconsciously, that I am the major problem solver, everything comes to me. And then they become a major obstacle to growth at that point. So that's just a couple of them. Yeah.
But it's almost, you become a slave to the self-importance. Like, without me, then therefore, like, none of these things would exist. It's one of the things that, as I'm coaching entrepreneurs, it bothers me. I hate the word employee. I hate the word assistant. And if you've listened to this podcast, I've actually had a little mini soapbox moment on it. But these words matter to, like, what you're talking about, the autonomy, the competence or confidence. Um and one of the I get a sense that you love words, like these words, like words matter because your brain is like listening to them. But the word that lately, over the last like couple months, that's just really like echoed in my heart, in my mind, like in my soul, is this word confidence. And looking at the etymology of it, it comes from the Latin words con, which with, and fidere, which means to trust. And so when you think about like there's confidence that you like instill with yourself because you've had the system, structure, and languages, right? That are trust, but there's also that there's energy that you give. I had one of my clients um, say, you either create energy or you consume energy. And I think that the one that you're talking about here that I think is so critical is this confidence.
Yeah. I'm curious from my perspective, Ben, I mean, you've been an entrepreneur for quite a few years. I mean, when have you found the most confidence? I mean, where do you derive that from? I guess is even a better question is where do you get your confidence
You know, if I would have told you, I would have said like, "Hey, going back to the athletic, fake it till you make it. You know, don't let them see you bleed. Don't let them see you sweat. Don't let them see you suffer. You know, it just be like an iron mask." And I will tell you that my greatest confidence is when I finally surrender to the fact that like I am such an incredibly imperfect human. And the fact is that if I just give myself that grace and I actually lead with the vulnerability that I wish other people would lead with, that is actually where a majority of my confidence has come in. I mean, I look at my team and I freely go, "You are so much better at this. You are so much better at this." And there's a sense of relief for me just to be able to go, my team is better at 99.5% of the things that happen on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, and it's not even close. Could I maybe in a moment in a sprint maybe bring a little bit more of that I'm going to call ego, that self-importance piece, be like, well, I could just do it better than you. But here's the thing, that's like a net sum game,
from? Oh, yeah, 100%.
right? I mean, so I would say if I had to bring it back to is the being super vulnerable. When Brene Brown came onto the scene and started like write her writing, I just went, this is a hidden superpower. Like this is a secret sauce. This is the mother sauce. This is the basis that you want to use in every recipe that you're going to cook with. Now, how's that resonate with you? I mean,
Oh man, you nailed on a few things is that vulnerability. I mean, just starting with the end of that is that if I look at the post Aaron, right, post in 2016 beyond, is my willingness to be more vulnerable and accept feedback because that was one of the things I really struggled with before. And what was the term that you used? That it was um, where you think you know it all, that you're the buck stops here kind of approach. And I just wasn't listening to people. I had made a major error in about 2014 and didn't even I made adjustments, but I think I was also a little bit of a blamer. I'd find people to blame, and just struggled with those kinds of things. I literally, Ben, and it's not even an understatement. I literally did, and again, I wasn't a terrible person. I was a good father. I tried to do my best, but from a leadership standpoint, I wouldn't say a 180, but it was a big switch to where I remember sitting with my team in 2016. We're going over core values and we're rating each other based upon core values, through the EOS process. And everyone got pretty good scores. I got two, I think a plus minus, which is like in the middle, and then a minus, right? On two of my own core values. So this was when I was starting to make some changes. And I I think if I would have received that feedback a year before, I would have been defensive. I would have not taken it. But man, I'm really proud of the way I took it back then, and I took it as a challenge almost, like, I have got to change some things, and one of them was I was not listening still, I still had to change some of that about me, but, but then I just focused on myself, and by doing that, the business and again, getting out of the way, trusting people, like, the Aaron today, she's our director of operations now, but when she first started, she was managing some of my accounts and passwords about 2 years ago. In the first week, she had all of my passwords, just all of them in the first week. I trust my hiring decisions to do that, one, but I have just learned I maybe a little too extreme, right? But I've gone the other way to where I seek to trust. In fact, I talk about it in the book is that give trust before you earn trust. Because if you wait for people to earn your trust, you're going to lose out on a lot of opportunities, and having them help you succeed and elevate the business. So, and your life.
Yeah, I mean, our team are these incredible like nodes, right? I mean, Dan Sullivan's talked a lot about like the new economy is about and leadership is about how many nodes can you create within your organization in creating the connection. I saw a peer of ours, Mark O'Donnell, when talking about EOS. He had on LinkedIn one of the slides that really spoke to me. He said, "Be soft on the people, be hard on the problem." And so often, like when we have something and you can just feel it, and this is like that self importance, that ego coming through this very reactive, fixed mindsets that we all have that can kind of rear up. Is that when we are running businesses, is that, and not only that, not only business, I'm actually curious. My following question, this is going to be, how did this old Aaron was in the home company, right? Because I think that so often when we are dealing with people, we just see the end in mind, especially if you're visionary. You see that horizon, and it's so easy to get lost that it's actually the person. The person screwed it up, right? Rather than it's actually the problem. And this is our incredible force multiplier who is just wanting to show up and be a hero. And like,
Yeah, Mark, I mean, it's interesting to bring up Mark. We go way back as well. And Mark has taught me, and others in the EOS process have taught me that mm, it's, with issues, it's usually people or a process, or maybe sometimes it's both, but never, like, you should rarely go to the people issue first. You should always say, okay, is it a process? Is it something broken over here that, I mean, this person may not be, may, you may be seeing some frustration manifesting from this person, but if you have a manual process that's just driving them nuts, then that's the process that's probably the issue. And if you automated that, it could make a huge difference, especially if it's something recurring in their work. So it's really a great quote by Mark. I love that.
yeah, I think that 95% of some of the dissonance and stress that happens in terms of leading other people is this that there is no perfect process that allows in fact I would actually say that the whole process of things that are you're wanting to make reoccur, right, that are repeatable is actually a movement away from the humanization, like the humanity of what does it mean. I mean, the Four Seasons CEO says we systematize repeatable so we can humanize the exceptional. This is one of the reasons why, like, even my own company, we're building out I'm going to call it like a concierge, like epoxy that goes over all the different systems. Because my biggest thing that I think as an entrepreneur and that I want my team to also feel is the freedom of emotion, the freedom to not be bothered. And so much of it comes down to system. It's not always people. I think it's 90% system structure and 10% like potential people. Um, I mean, you've obviously built, scaled, sold multiple companies. You are a very asked for speaker. You get a front row seat. How does that land?
There's several different channels we could take with this, right? But
Yeah.
but I think that again, human, like, if we don't, like, even in coaching, right? In what you and I, we coach clients and so
Yep.
forth, is that if we don't keep that human connection as a key kind of central to it. In fact, it's a great book, AI Driven Leader, out there, that I don't know if you've read, but he talks about we still need to be in the driver's seat when it comes to technology, and being the thought, he uses the term thought leader. And you don't need to be like I'm considered an industry thought leader. I'm not talking He's not really talking about that. He's talking about in everything you do. So first create it. And I love how you're empowering that word team, and that epoxy term. That's I love that. But how your team still needs to, and my team still needs to, if they're going to use chat and AI and other non-human technology, is to first create that in their minds and lay it out, keep it away from technology until you really are in the driver's seat of whatever that vision might look like, and then use it as a partner. And that's what he talks about in his book, is that use that as AI and other things as a partner. But if we lose, and I feel really strongly about this, Ben, we lose our creative wheelhouse, we're creative beings. Like that's
Yes.
we thrive in creativity. In fact, I did my capstone with my PhD, my
Your
master's
PhD.
program, and my capstone was on the aspiring entrepreneur and why they give up so soon and what kind of gets in the way. And one of the number one reasons, one is they lose their autonomy early on because they're in the grind. They're again burnout. They're not doing the things that give them energy. But another key factor is they lose their ability to create. They get into the
Mm,
minutia, and creativity is taken away. And I think that creativity is so human, right?
yes.
It's part of our soul. It's part of who we are. And when we lose it, if we let technology take over our creativity, which is already happening, like we're seeing it, then we become dumb thinkers. How else to put it? We just can't think for ourselves anymore. I'm worried about that for my kids, and
Yeah.
how much they rely on that to do like research papers, all that. You just have to stay in the driver's seat.
Yeah. I find that when I'm being creative, I'm connected. And I'm not talking just like whatever you want to call it, universe, God. But I feel a connection and a sense of like gratitude for those around me. When I get done with a real like deep creative session, I love being around people, and I think people like being around me because I bring an immense amount of energy because I just feel an abundance, and I think that you would said a word, guided genius, and I think that like I mean that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Guided genius is people connecting with themselves first, and when they connect with themselves first, it allows them to connect with others. I mean, how do you define guided genius?
Yeah, guiding genius is really what gives them energy, work, home. I mean, similar to unique ability in the sense that it is something that's obviously unique to them, but it also ties to their own personal purpose. And that's the defining factor with the guiding genius. The guiding part of the genius is like I also use the term guiding truths as a term to say, what do I want to be true about me? I've got my 9 guiding truths. Like my mind is at peace, my actions reflect character, my family receives my time. Those are my guiding truths. And so lining those up with what I'm wired to do, like even professionally, so that my personal purpose, my guiding truths are constantly driving what I do in my roles and responsibilities at work, how much energy I'm giving them. We actually, with my coaching clients, we give them this full kind of guiding genius report that tells them what roles and responsibilities they should be spending their time on, especially as it relates to home care. And so we want them to get energy out of what they do, whether it's personally or professionally. And so we just use that term to help define that in that way. So
So, Aaron, I want to bring us back, right? We've seen this trajectory, right? The lies we tell ourselves, but it's been very much in this like personal or this professional setting. I want to talk a little bit about the Aaron that pre 2016, the on the personal standpoint, because at the end of the day, like we think that what we do is who we are, right? And the reality is when we're actually being real honest with ourselves, like who we are is what we need to do, right? So, can you talk a little bit about how this was impacting you from like in your personal life, right? Obviously, you must have an incredibly patient partner.
I do 29 years almost.
29 years, 6 kids. Talk to me a little bit about the things or the lies that we tell ourselves, like, on those other identities, not the entrepreneur, not the boss, not the visionary, but dad, partner, lover, friend.
Yeah, and I can only speak for myself back then as I was, again, living the lie that I was my identity was so tied to my work that when I would come home, that my I'd have one of my kids telling me something, right? Something they were doing, something they were involved in, and I had a hard time, really hard time separating and listening to them. I remember some conversations where they would say, "Dad, Dad." I mean, I was off in some other space, or they'd have me in fact, my daughter, I remember one time she was, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, and she's like, "Dad, do I need to repeat that to you?" That was I'll never forget. Now I laugh, we were laughing about it because it was kind of funny the way she said it, but in hindsight, it wasn't that funny, because of what it meant. And, I mean, one thing I am proud of, even, when the kids were really young, we have traveled. Some of my air miles come from we've taken a lot of vacations as a family. My kids have been air travelers since they were little. They all have their own Sky Miles accounts, and so we've created a lot of memories. When they turned 14, um, I took them on because I was gone so much with my travel, is I would take them on about 7 to 10-day trip just with dad. And then when they become a senior in high school, we take them on into in fact, I was just got back from the Caribbean, with my senior daughter. And so we made some really good traditions, but those don't replace see, I thought because I was doing that, that I must be a great father, and frankly, people were telling me how great of a father I was because I had good kids. Well, it's because of their mom that they were good kids, and mostly, and I just was not present even when I was physically there, and we hear that, but I just was not there, and I missed some activities too, that were important, my kids. I try to, arrange around them, but that was a challenge, and I just was burning the candle at both ends at times, right? And so I was
Yeah.
working from home, at the dinner table, back when I didn't have a home office, and so my kids sending the wrong message to my kids and my wife, who always stepped in, supported, just a saint, during that time. So
Was there a moment that your wife, obviously Dale was a mentor, and I feel that the partners who make it 29 years, they have it's either the raised eyebrow, it's the we they all have like their telltale sign, right? Their poker tell. Was there a moment where your partner kind of had a Dale moment, like, "Hey, you look horrible."
yeah, I had a few of those moments with my wife, Heather, and, she really kept me from losing it, I think, from losing it all, honestly, is that I remember one time she even told my business partner, Eric, who I brought up, he earned equity, over time, and he became a partner, and she's like, "Eric, I need your help. You need to," and really kind of told him how he could help me better so that I could be home more. And so there was that, and then just several moments, those late night talks. She was more worried about my own personal well-being. I was worried about hers, and we had a pretty good open communication. But sometimes it went too long. Sometimes she was afraid of, again, the feedback is I think I got more defensive at
Yeah.
times with her because if here's the lie that we also tell ourselves is whether we're a man or a woman, whether you're the entrepreneur running the business or you're the spouse who's living with that crazy entrepreneur, that that we are living the lie that that our spouse doesn't understand
Ooh.
and that they don't get what we're going through. That's an absolute in most cases, that's not true. What we don't understand is what they're going through in the process and what we probably are putting them through. And we got real in 2015, that conversation with Dale. I remember just getting so honest with my wife, tears, both crying, just really like just letting it all out that things had to change or I would lose my business. And I was growing, but because of where I was going, I could see that this was a losing battle unless I made some personal changes. And we made a personal changes as a couple. You know, you say we've always had a good marriage. I say yes, we've always had a good marriage. But obviously with marriage, there's times where it gets more challenging, and that's mostly been on me. And just being fully vulnerable is that and people know Heather, they'll say, "Yes, absolutely, it was you," 'cause she is a saint, and she really put up with a lot, and I did not take the time back then, the pre-Aaron, I guess you could say, my former self. It's interesting, we usually are serving our former selves in some way, and I'm but, but my former self was not giving her the chance and listening to her frustrations like I should. And I know, because we've talked about it since, that she was holding those down herself and trying to just buck up and deal with it and thinking this will pass. So in some way, we were both kind of living that lie until we got really honest and vulnerable, like you mentioned before. I'm curious, Ben, on the same side of the coin here, on the other side. I mean, how about you?
Which portion?
With you, with dealing with with your wife Jenna, and dealing with some of those frustrations as well. I mean, how have you navigated?
Yeah, well, I think what makes ours I think also unique is that not only do we live together, but we work together and we play together. And when you look at our Colby scores, we have opportunity. Like they say, it's three or more distance between numbers. And again, for those who don't know Colby, it measures your cognitive, your I will or I won't. And three of our four sort of, if you want to call it lanes or tanks, we have like definitely three or more between our two numbers. And so opportunity for a lot of, yeah, a lot of opportunity for dissonance. I think the thing that at first when we got together, it was like it felt like it was a power struggle, right? Like whose voice is going to be like listened to, right? And if whoever's voice is listened to is either right or it's the wiser one, or we're the one that's like in charge. And I think after 13 years of being together, I think that we realized that like when we have seasons of like moments, seasons of time, seasons like of just I mean potentially large blocks of time where it was we were competing, but we weren't actually competing with each other. If, in retrospect, we were competing with ourselves. We were competing against our own egos. We were competing against our own truths that we maybe didn't actually want to like actually tell the truth about, and more let alone actually admit it to the person, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. The person who you trust the most, that helps provide you like tailwinds so that you have that confidere like with trust, right? And that you want. I think that my realizations over time that when I feel in myself defensiveness. Like right now, I'm in the process of starting to like write a book, and went through the editing process. And Jenna was actually doing some editing, and she has some like really good discernment of like it's missing this, and I could feel myself just sort of internally just go that like I don't know if I really like this, and but it's these realizations that well, she's not criticizing me. She doesn't think this is bad. And in fact, this is a lie that I'm trying to tell myself that like there's something happening here that isn't. And I think that what I've learned over the last 13 years being in business with my life partner, and not just in one business, but like over 6 businesses, and and having kids, losing a child, and then launching a charity, is that these things, these frustrations that come up, instead of them being inconveniences, are actually a gift, because it's usually a boundary or a pushback that I should probably be having a conversation with myself and awareness.
Our wives would get along. It's Tara Colby's quite different from mine, and yes, it's that. She also edited my book. Yeah, and same similar thing. I had times where I was like, I don't know if I like, I don't know if I agree with that or like that. And most often she's right. And I just learned, I just learned that she's far more analytical than I am,
Mhm.
and that's super helpful in a lot of things. But yeah,
I had this moment that actually happened a year ago from this coming July. In this idea of like the season, it just felt like maybe we were competing. And Dan Sullivan has this question he always asks. He goes, "What's more powerful, being in charge or in control?" And again, it's something I've used in rooms, and inevitably goes, "Well, being in control." And it's like, well, no, actually, being in charge means that you can change anything you want, right? But allowing someone else have control means that it's like still 100% of you not having to do it. And and I always sometimes would feel that Jenna was trying to be in control, and that I think that it maybe bothered me, and not fully under like why. I mean, we both have really big personalities. I think people who know us, we both have big engines. I mean, these are all the things, by the way, that I fell in love with her about: big engine, big personality. Um, but she had this moment last summer where she goes, "You know what? I had the realization," and I'm going, "Oh, where's this going?" And she goes, "I had the realization that you are right almost 100% of the time." And she told me, "You know what? From now on, I'm just going to let you make decisions. I'm going to like get out of your way, because we have these moments, and yet you are right majority of the time." And in literally, you think that I'd be like internally cheering, being like, "Yes." And it was for about a period of 0.00001. And then what came crashing down on me, you know what she was giving me? Confidere. She was giving me her unadulterated 100% confidence. And I realized she went from a brilliant move, from being trying to be in control, to she was in charge. Because I will tell you, the weight, the weight of realizing that I no longer have any guardrails, which I do. I realize that I do, but like just like that was so huge. And I think that, and it's interesting to me that when we surrender, when we actually surrender, I mean, she sort of surrendered to this, and for me, when I actually surrender, I actually gain more power.
that's a good marriage there. That's a great marriage, right? Is that when someone can step down and let the other person um, spread their wings, right? I mean, I don't know how else you put that, but that's powerful. And I think it plays to like like what are our roles personally, or even in in a business, right? Is that you could do the same thing for her in another capacity, which I think is important. Again, um, lot of this, over the last 29 years, but it's always been that more of this kind of we're just have grown to be just trusted partners. And yes, we have our differences, but I think like Jenna has, Heather's accepted that there's just got to be a level of trust that she can't be in all the details in the business, and she's starting to get more involved in this business, which has been a lot of fun, and having her more involved in our breakaway 365 coaching program. And on the Colby side, she's certified in Colby now. Been fun.
Oh,
So
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a maturation that happens, and I think it's this um, like when you lay a wine down and let it age, is it gains these characteristics that can only happen through like the aging process, and I liken it, and I'm curious, Aaron, you and I have had a lot of conversation about mindsets, like a mindset of like, hey, you know what, I should trust other people. Super simple to say it, but incredibly hard, not only to do it, but to consistently show up and do it again and again and again. So it's not for the lack of being like the awareness of it. Why are simple mindsets so profound?
Well, I mean, just backing up a little bit is that I think the reason why they don't happen or that we struggle with even some of what sounds simple, right? Give trust first, let them earn it later. Like that sounds simple, extremely difficult to do. And it takes practice. But in order to practice, you have to consistently be self aware. Like back then, I always had to be checking myself. I had to verbalize what the changes I was trying to make with other people, so I could have more of a support team. But that self-awareness was back in 2016 when I really got into positive psychology. And again, he talks about it in his book, Sean Acor, and in The Happiness Advantage. But that was the number one. In fact, I remember it was 2016 or maybe it was 2017 that was my self-awareness was my word for the year. Like
Mm,
that's what I wanted to focus on because I didn't feel like I was very self-aware about what I needed to work on and what I didn't. And so I just wanted to just go into everything going, okay, am I giving this person the trust that they, that I want to give them so that I can elevate in my role better, or even personally, how I was treating my children. Trust again is an important thing with kids. The more they feel trusted by you as a parent, the more confidence they'll gain. But without self awareness, it's really hard to make these small changes again on these things that sound easy, but it's not like it just happens the next day. Like we have got to continually, okay, how did that go and process it and then prioritize those things that you want to improve upon. In positive psychology, there's a concept called character strengths. There's 24 character strengths, and there's actually an assessment. And so the listeners can go to vicharacter.org and they can
okay.
take a free assessment, and it tells them what their top 5 key character strengths, like leadership, creativity. They all tie to the Aristotle's 6 virtues, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool.
And so, but what I've tried to do, self-regulation is a character strength. And so try to identify 1 or 2 of those character strengths and be more self-aware of where I'm falling short and where I would like to improve. But on the flip side of all this is it's always better. And I think Dan really has taught us this in Strategic Coach is that better to focus on the strengths on like if you take that assessment, that vicharacter.org assessment, and again, it was started by Martin Seligman and Chris Peterson came up with those 24 character strengths. So it's really rooted in science, probably more than a lot of other assessments out there.
Yep.
If you take it, it'll identify your top 5. Focus on those first before you start picking the ones off the other list. Right? Is how can I make those even better? Anyway, kind of I don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and just for the listeners, we'll put that link in either the description or in the show notes so that people can go do that. Um, well, I think what's interesting, you said the word practice. It takes practice. So for you, your word in 2017 was self-awareness. How does a person build structure, system, language for you to have the consistency to practice, right? It's not like, well, I'll practice when it like the I need that self-awareness moment, right? Because that's actually when the practice shows up, right? But So, how did that show up for you? And what are things that you would say would help people, whatever their word is, either it's the character skill, it's the thing that, but specifically talking about self awareness that they could build in their own life?
Yeah. So if you take back prior to 2016, the pre-Aaron, is that I had structured my day. If you looked at my calendar back then, there was no space. I was so tightly wound up in my calendar in what I did and wasn't effective, wasn't super efficient. So the first thing I would say is like when you want to make changes, I call them deep thrive sessions because it's a combination of several different concepts out there, like clarity breaks, keystone periods, um, those kinds of things. But deep thrive sessions are creating space, hour, 2 hours, of time, if you can, every day, where you're journaling, you're taking time to reflect. Too often, and I've seen this with entrepreneurs, is that we if it's whether it's our ADHD or whatever is getting in the way, is that we don't like to be by ourselves as much,
It's so true, though.
alone with our thoughts. And it's for me personally, I've had a hard time making any real progress personally or changes without creating space for it. At least even the self-awareness space for it or the reflection space. So on these deep thrive sessions, I try to journal. I read my scriptures. It's really important to me to kind of connect with God, and then exercise is kind of a separate component to that. But then I tackle one thing. I think of one thing I want to accomplish. Often it's personal, like one thing I want to learn more about or lean into or think more about. And it just allows me, and again, I kind of have this formula in my book that I've written about, but it's something that I sometimes I lose sight of. I get so busy, I might just do it a couple times a week. But if you could even do it once a week, where you're just creating 2 hours of that reflection and vulnerability, being honest with yourself on why you made a decision, what drove that decision. Like think about that. Like if we could, like some of our bigger decisions, if we took time to evaluate after the decision, you know, the whole experience transformer process, right? Where we evaluate what happened and why, and were we truly in our best leadership form when we made the decision, or was I in my best parental form when I made that decision? And coming back to being vulnerable with ourselves and saying, you know what, this is what I would do differently. This is how I would, next time I'm faced with that. And over time, it's just it's this flywheel, that just over time just starts going. And for me, that was the case. Is I just started making these little improvements, and I'm still making them. I'm still extremely weak in certain areas. I have those 9 guiding truths. I have 2 or 3 that almost always are off kilter, right? At the same time, that I need work on, and so they're never perfect. But I think that time for that reflection and creating the space in your calendar to do it, to create. Like sometimes I create new things during that time. I just go into like one thing I'm going to solve during that time, whatever it might be. But that has been
Yeah.
a game changer for me.
And can you tell the audience again the nine principles, the nine guiding truths that you just were talking about there?
Yeah. So my 9 guiding truths are: my mind is at peace, my actions reflect character, my family receives my time, my my heart belongs to Christ. So being of Christian faith. Um, my ventures create freedom. How many have I just listed here? My body is in good health.
I think that's five. Yep.
I think that's 6. And
Okay,
then,
six.
I said my actions reflect character, right?
Yep.
Um, mine is at peace. You caught me on the spot here, Ben. But yeah, but they really drive like a lot of my decision making, where I'm going and so forth. Um, just what I want to be sure about myself.
these incredible lenses and filters that you can like pre-mortem and post-mortem before the decision, after the decision, and where were you true to like an anchor, or where did you actually maybe ignore an anchor? So if someone's sitting here today and going, man, this makes so much sense. How do they get their 9? How do they get their 6, their 5, their 3? I mean, even if they can just get their 1, like where do they start?
Yeah. So you can actually, I created, speaking of using technology, and again, you're the thought leader here in this technology, but we've created an AI bot or an AI tool, I guess not really a bot, but an AI tool that asks them 9 questions. And they can literally just go to our website, breakaway365.com. And I do other, we work with other groups beyond just home care. So anyone can go there. So breakaway365.com. They scroll down and there's a guide, it says Guiding Truths AI tool, and they can click on that, answer the questions. It literally puts together a Guiding Truth statement for them.
Ooh, ooh. Hey, we'll put that link in the description again for everyone.
The one I missed one. My life is filled with abundance.
Ooh,
That was the one I missed. I think I got the rest of them. So
it's a great segue to this portion. So I want to circle back to this 10x outcome, right? We talked about the lies. We've talked about the different things we have to navigate, our different identities. I want to talk about this outcome. So 2016 on, you start building a roadmap, right? And you kind of hinted, you talked a little bit, you've hinted at some of these different things, but um, what specifically, if you were to communicate with someone here who's going, man, a lot of what Aaron is saying is like really landing for me. I'm not being present, like I'm not being the self-awareness that I want to be, like I'm not living like my bank account and maybe my equity value might actually show that I'm winning, but when I actually look at the thing that really matters, I'm not winning. How would you go back and say, hey, 16 to 20, 10x payout more than what you actually someone else in your same position would have gotten? Walk us through that journey.
I've thought about this actually many times as far as what, especially as we share it with others and how they can make this kind of progress and this kind of changes. And what's missing, I think, from most, and I'm going to repeat something from one of your previous podcasts, Reagan Archibald, who helps me with my own health, but he talked about energy. The comment he made about, I think what's missing is understanding what gives us energy and what doesn't. And he mentioned the whole rejuvenation, right? And how we're not prioritizing our health as much, and we're not prioritizing um, the I don't know what word he used exactly, but I just come back to that energy and that post Aaron, when I really started focusing on the few things, right, that gave me energy. One was creativity. Like I knew that if I was not finding ways to create, I was not the Aaron I wanted to be. And that I'm happiest when I'm creating. And I'm also making the biggest impact when I'm creating because I have this very unique skill set to take various concepts and build it into whether it's a tool or another concept and bring it to a level that people can understand. And so when those things are missing in my life, what were missing in my life before 2016, I understood what was draining my energy. Then I was able to give some attention to my health. That's when I found Reagan a few years ago, and my creativity. Writing a book, right, is tapping into that creativity. But the thing I would tell people, and maybe going back to the root of your question there is you got to start somewhere, right? And you've got So I love this quote that Martin Luther King, he says, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, keep moving forward. And so we have got if the only thing we can do right now is crawl, then what does that look like for us? In whatever area we're trying to improve on, if it's becoming more having mastery over an addiction or something that is pulling us from being our best selves, then what's the crawl part of that element? Identify that. And then there's the compounding results. Once we start with the crawl, we can then start to walk. But if we can just model that out, whatever thing we're working on, and focus on that one thing, like self-awareness in 2016 was the one thing I wanted to focus on. And so back then I wish I had known about that quote before then. I maybe have been even more strategic. But if self-awareness is what you want to work on, what is the crawl part of that? Maybe it's with my kids. Maybe it's with my family, and maybe it's just at dinner time. Maybe that's the crawl part, is that at dinner time, phones are off the table and I'm going to be all present with especially if you have younger children, that's super critical. And that's the crawl. Then maybe the walk part is taking, one-on-ones with your children, right? And being more present there. And you just kind of move it. And over time, before you know it, it's like, wow, I've made so much progress. It's the whole gain rather than being in the gap. It's really understanding where you are today and being super honest, vulnerable, self-aware. This is where I'm at. This is where I'm at today. I would like to get here, make sure that we're being realistic, and then just crawl, walk, run, fly, right? Between that, I think we'll just start somewhere, is the point.
Yeah. Uh, well, that's beautiful. My favorite one that's more on the entrepreneur side is Zig Ziglar. Is he says you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And I feel like it's the 90% skill that people think it's more knowledge. Nope. They think it's more skill. Nope. 90% skill in any of the things I think that are happening on this well, I'm gonna say in any, not even entrepreneurial. I'm talking about like if it's relationship, if it's health, if it's wealth, is just start. That's the 90%.
Just move, just do something, right? Yeah. Yeah, and that's my story, my journey. I think it's easy for people to look at, and I have had people, even family members and friends, who may not have understood the whole journey, and they see you and they think, and again, people put themselves in the gap. They see you and they go, "Oh, you've written a book and you've done this and you started this business, you exited this business." Man, I want people to understand that the journey is messy, right? And it's hard. And people come to me and say, "Home care pulse, wow, overnight success." Well, that was 12 years of an overnight success, right? It takes just dedication and time and never giving up. Like I've slidden so many times. I've fallen back so many times. I've had setbacks that have rocked me. I know you have been. You've had some personal challenges. I know with your son. We all have things that are just hard, and it's like start where you're at because you can't compare it to somebody else. That's just a dangerous game. Is you gotta just know and be very, very honest. There's a Andy Stanley. I'm trying to remember the book name, but he has the five decisions. Oh, can't remember. I'll think of the name, but he talks about the first question you should ask when you're making a decision is, am I being honest with myself? Really, right? Am I truly being honest with myself and making and like meaning why am I doing this? Why am I making this decision? And I think that vulnerability, that honesty of like, am I truly like, am I thinking I'm better than I am, or am I telling myself a lie that I believed over the years? Because I certainly did. I was telling myself an absolute lie that over time, you just believe your own lies. And I think we just have to be completely honest with ourselves. Anyway.
Yeah, one of those lies that you had talked about before was this idea that I couldn't do anything alone. I didn't want to do anything alone. And there's something happened in 2020, and if you kind of a COVID, just a kind of a small deal. It actually forced me to actually address that. And I'm saying this aloud. And again, I know that COVID was tough, but I am so grateful for some of the things that came out of COVID. And one of those was the forced being at home and the forced sort of just creating a little bit of moat around myself that allowed me to actually think and to actually be.
I hope that a lot of people feel this because I feel the same way. Is that I had literally exited my company 3 weeks before COVID hit. The home care pulse. I've actually had another exit since, but, um, that, I was like, you know, too much time maybe, but that really helped me, be more, like, reconnect with myself because we don't like to be alone with ourselves, and you can get alone with yourself. Funny story, Ben, I recently so when I was a kid growing up, I loved putting together model planes,
Oh, yes.
like, and I just love the creativity of that. I think that was one of my early signs of creativity because of I read the instructions. A lot of the instructions weren't very good, and so I would figure things out, and that's kind of how I connected. I recently ordered a model. I haven't done it in years, but I recently ordered a model plane. It's like, when am I gonna find the time for that? But I'm going to, because those kinds of things, when you're reconnecting like that, it forces you to think and be by yourself for a while. I'm hoping my son will join me, my 6 he's 16 now, my youngest. But, it's in those little moments, those little hobbies or creativity. Fishing, right, is a great way for me to connect with myself. I have a river back here that, I don't fish enough. Like, we've gotta take that time to be by ourselves and be with our own thoughts.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I love waking up at 5 a.m. because I'm literally alone in the house. Aaron, from a psychology standpoint, why are we afraid to be alone with ourselves?
From the psychology, and then I'll speak personally, that kind of emphasizes this, is that in psychology, we have, well, I'll lack of a better term, sometimes we have demons, or we have things that in our past that are hard, that we've never really sat with, things that lies that we've told ourselves about ourselves that we have learned to believe, and therefore, if we try to unpack that, it's hard, it's hurtful, it's painful. It's there's so much to unpack with that, but also we have these limiting beliefs, right? Is that we believe again that if we keep we're in survival mode or whatever, but these limiting beliefs, these thinking traps keep us from from maybe sitting with them, right? We don't sit with those beliefs. We don't sit with the way we're thinking. We don't question our own thoughts. We don't question the circumstances that we're in. Um, we don't try to reframe, using a psychology term, we don't try to reframe our past. Like Dan says, again, we quoted Dan a few times here, but Dan says our past is mostly made up, right? Because it's in the past, we can recreate our thoughts and how we associate circumstances. We don't take the time for that because it's painful. I mean, it's just hard, to maybe sit with those things.
Yeah, I think that that's so true. Anyone who's ever dug a hole and you're excavating dirt, realize first couple scoops, you're like, okay, this is great. But once you get into like past where you can see the head of the shovel, and then you start to realize for you to go deeper, you have to go wider, right? So for the deeper you go, the wider you have to go, which means that then you have to go back up to things you've already done to maybe shave off some of the side, right? And as you continue, um, excavation, I think, is of yourself. I think is one of the things of greatest worth. But man, it is hard.
Well, and for me personally, what made it hard hard for me previously to be by myself, to focus. I meditate now, um, which helps me process my thoughts, is that I didn't wanna face my mistakes. I didn't wanna face the fact that maybe I wasn't as good of a father as I thought I was, and I wanted to it's so much more comfortable to live the lie sometimes, is that at least for a while, and I mean, it comes to roost eventually. I mean, it's going to manifest in other ways that are far more painful than if you just sit with yourself and deal with it and really ask yourself some open and honest questions. Why do I do this? What are my triggers, especially when it comes to if there's some addictive behavior that you're dealing with, whether it be alcohol or just your work. I mean, whatever it is, and honest with yourself about why you're spending more time at work. Like we both have friends who make an excuse to be at work so they don't have to be home and be home with their families. And they need to be honest about why that is and what's going on and have some open and honest conversations. But those are all painful. We'd rather in the moment, because it's easier right now in this very moment, this very present moment, to not do that, to just continue to live that lie or to go on how I've been going on. And again, over time that builds up, compounds in a negative way and just destroys lives, destroys marriages, destroys partnerships, destroys businesses when we can't sit with ourselves and be really honest.
Yeah. I mean, that's honesty is so hard, so simple, yet so profound. I want to transition some of our conversation here to what's the good life? I know you write about it in your book, and it's something that you talk often with when you're presenting. A mutual friend of ours, Joe. I remember being out to dinner with him, and we were talking about how when we get introduced to people, right? When we meet new people, we're so often be like, "Oh, hi, what's your name? Oh, where are you from?" And then we ask the third one, the inevitable, "What do you do?" And he had said, he goes, I was reading this article or this meme, or it was this quote on like Instagram or something of that nature, where he said it really resonated with me. The quote said, instead of asking me what I do or what my favorite cover is or color is or my favorite music is, ask me what I live for. And I feel like your mindset and framework, the good life, like what's the good life? I'd love if you'd share with our audience, what does that mean when you say the good life?
Yeah, and the cool thing about that term, "the good life," is it's has a different meaning for everybody because just like abundance, and it ties to abundance, right? Is that my abundant life, my good life might be different from yours in what you really want out of your life. And so the good life is unique to individuals. However, there's some defining things where you could define the good life. And the good life term, what's cool about that term is it's been around for over 2,000 years. Aristotle was the first one who came up with that term, is a good life, and he tied it with the term eudaimonia, which is there's hedonic happiness and eudaimonic happiness, which eudaimonia is more of the joyful happiness, more internal happiness and
Wow.
joy. And that's the good life. It comes from within, and it's not just this surface level. I can be happy going to the Caribbean, right? That we did last week. I can be happy sitting on a beach, but that's momentary happiness. Eudaimonic or eudaimonia is all about internal joyful happiness, which creates the good life. There's a great book that called The Good Life that's based upon the 80, I don't know how, it might be closing in on 90-year Harvard study. We all, the oh, I'm gonna I'm gonna hammer it now, being put on the spot, but it's the adult study, the longest standing adult study where they over the last 80 plus years, they've measured the happiness of specific individuals in this group over this lifespan, and what contributes to their more of their eudaimonic happiness. And the number one contributor to happiness, to that kind of happiness, like again, there's two kinds of happiness, is our relationships. I mean, millions, if not billions, and put into this study, they came out with with one we probably could have guessed, maybe, but there's relationships and how we connect in this life. And so for me, my good life, I mean, that comes down to my relationships, my family, of course, being number one, my relationship with God, and then my relationship with people like you. I mean, I'm in free zone, and we're in the same group, Ben and I, with amazing entrepreneurs. Partly because I mean, I learned so much from that, but man, it's the connections. And that the more we connect, the more we relate, the more we communicate with people and live like that life together and on that journey together, that's at least a good part of the good life. And of course, the freedoms that we've talked about, are important.
You're so right. It's the connections. And when I think people hear connections, they think, oh, okay, you guys have a common bond. You're entrepreneurs. You're looking for like your 10x growth, right? And we're looking at like these tactical and sometimes not tactical things. But I got to tell you that there's something else that goes on in that room. And it is a connection of shared mission, shared desire of like to discover your own version of truth, your connection in like uncovering what that good life is, that that joy. Not looking for the happiness, the actual joy. Because I remember going to this like industry event where I think the guy's name was Jamie Clark, and he had climbed Mount Everest, and I actually saw him speak twice. The first time I saw him speak it was just a single guy, bachelor guy, living like the mountaineer life. And I remember it being so poignant because all of a sudden he's talking about it as he's getting to the top of like Mount Everest, and he stands on top of the chair and he's like, and I'm here at this moment. And you're like, oh, I want that moment. Fast forward, see him 5 years later. He's now married. I think at the time he has one or two children. And he has this other moment. And this other moment is, and he's talking about, he gets up there and he's expecting this same sort of like happiness. And he realizes how selfish he's been and that he is here all by himself, risking his life when his wife and his kids are at home. And how that was a turning point. And I feel like that's like the connection that happens in like these rooms, and people are listening to us. When you're in a room, it could be a concert for like all we're talking about, where everyone there is all tuned in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do coaching. I coach groups, mostly home care leaders in our breakaway program. And those moments, man, tearful moments. Like you feel it, and people are that those connections carry them through some challenging times, and even in their business, right? When they know that they have a larger community that they can connect to, that understand them. And that's where, going back to what you said early in our conversation about how you're um, empowering your team on that human connection, is that we cannot lose that because we lose the good life in the process. That we have to find ways to keep that human connection live, to go out of our way. I know I would say I don't like labels like introvert, extrovert, because I can do both sometimes, and there is some research that says that that's not necessarily healthy, but I am really, like, good with sitting in my, office or sitting out by the river, being by myself. I am, maybe sometimes groups give me anxiety, I don't know, but I'm really great by myself. But when I push myself out of my comfort zone And every time I attend the groups that you and I attend together, all of that, at the end of the day, man, it's like I have never once, I can't think of a time when I pushed myself into one of those groups or did that where I regretted it and where it didn't help me, like, give me the energy to get me through maybe some tough challenges personally. And so, but mapping out the good life for yourself is important. Like, what do you want? And being okay with that, and making sure that relationships are, the research shows. I mean, the relationship should be a key part of what the good life should look like for you.
Yeah. So, someone listening right now, what are the two, three, four things that they can be doing to like help them map out, like either to do an audit, right, of their existing relationships, those who consume energy and those who create energy, right, in their life, right? And maybe like ask that question, are these the relationships that are really bringing the good life, this human connection? And then ask the same, and is it really?
Yeah. You bring up such a great point, and this may be a little bit contrarian because we've been told often that, like, cut those people, like, if they're not giving you energy, then, or they're bringing you down, then you need to cut them out of your lives. But I think before you do that, ask yourself an honest question: is it I? Like, what is my part in this relationship? Am I Am I getting, especially when it's a family member, like, I think those are the relationships you gotta be really careful. Easier when it's a friend, but when it's a family member, and whether it be, obviously spouse, I mean, that's when you really need to be honest with yourself, but whether it's a brother, sister, parents, whatever it might be, or in-laws, that how much are you taking away from this relationship? Are you contributing? Are you, are you ignoring some obvious things that maybe you could be contributing to the relationship that might change the entire dynamics of that relationship? I personally have had this with a family member that had some challenges in life, and I never once thought that I was gonna cut this person out of my life, but at least time with this person, right?
Yep.
And then I had another mentor of mine, just, who knew about the situation, knew about the challenges, and he said, "Have you really questioned you and what you and how you're communicating in this relationship?" And what I was doing was I was being very judgmental with
Mm,
this person. Very even to their face, like saying things they should change about themselves, or things that, and I was being just not I was not uh being a good listener. I was not really putting it all into the relationship. And so I made some changes, some intentional changes in that relationship that literally turned that relationship almost into 180 to where we were back being who we were before, right? And fostering a good relationship. And not that this person didn't have any challenges, or they were not contributing, but often when we change the way we're going about it, that other person may follow. And that's exactly what happened. So that's the first thing. I think that we're too quick sometimes to be empowered to cut certain people out of our life before we're really taking a self-evaluation of ourselves. But when you do that self-evaluation and it's clear you've done everything you can, and that's often the case, that maybe you put everything you can into it, man, you've gotta it's probably time, with certain people that you just don't make yourself available.
yeah.
You would otherwise, because that just I mean, we all have those people that just drain our energy. Negative. They see everything, pessimists see, things as permanent. And so when I'm around people who see setbacks as permanent, I have a hard time being around them for too long.
Preach, brother.
Yeah. And I mean, setbacks are just mostly temporary. They're obviously, when we lose a loved one, the loss is permanent, but the way we go about it and the way we view it, like time, or the way we're viewing it this week might be temporary, and the way we view it next week is going to be different because we're evolving and we're changing and we're
Yeah.
improving. That can still be somewhat temporary in the way we think about it.
Are there downsides to positivity?
Yes. I used to think there were a lot more downsides to positivity than before I went through the program. Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology, he would proclaim himself as a pessimist before he even got into this. He was wanting to help himself overcome some things and the way he looked at things. And I just mentioned the pessimists see setbacks as permanent, and optimists see setbacks as temporary. And I used to think of optimists because I didn't necessarily proclaim myself as one, but I would now, is that I saw them as like Pollyanna, they just saw everything rose colored glasses, that kind of thing. And I would separate the realist from the optimist. Well, you can be an optimist and a realist at the same time. And so positivity, are there times where someone can be overly positive? Yeah, I think in extreme moments, the old story of that Jim Collins writes about in his book Good to Great, the prisoner of war, Scott, I can't remember his name, but anyway, he he shares the example of the people who were in the prison of war camps. The optimists kept saying, "Well, we'll be out by Easter," and then Easter would come, and then they would say, "Well, then I'll be out by Christmas," and then Christmas would come, and they would still be in there. And over time, the optimists gave up, right?
Yeah.
But I wonder if we're using the wrong term there, and maybe those weren't necessarily optimists, and the realists were just saying, "Oh, we're going to get out, but I'm not quite sure when, but we're going to get out." Like, saw it differently. So I think that in extremes, yes, but in most cases, I think positivity typically wins the day. That's just my personal opinion. What about you? What do you think? Curious.
Well, as a glass overflowing optimist, I would say I think that story, the good to great, I think that optimism without realistic outcomes can be relatively I don't want to say destructive because I don't think that is because that seems too permanent. Again, there's my optimism coming in. I think can be disruptive, especially because if you are a person who brings that energy to to the game, is that people tap into it. They tap into it, and if you don't land within a plus or minus like percentage error rate, that all of a sudden like people start to lose that confidence, that with trust. And so I think that optimism without like clear vision.
Oh, that's so well said. Yeah. Yeah, because if you're and I'm just thinking about people I've worked with in the past where if the ones that paint such a rosy picture without clarity on the downfall or if we do this, this is what could happen. It'd be so great, and they get all excited, and that's it, right? That's the end of conversation. But true positivity, it's important. Like, tell them about the bigger vision, but here's what could happen. It's going to require all of you to work 45 hours a week for the next 3 months, right? Or whatever it might be, is like, let's be honest about what to get here. It's going to require this. And I think you're spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. What's beyond positivity? Is there anything beyond positivity?
Yeah, I think beyond positivity is again going back to the eudaimonia. I think it it trumps positivity, and what I mean by not trumps, but it's above it in the sense that regardless of if you're dealing with a really hard thing right now, financially, family, loved ones, whatever, and you're right in the moment of it, positivity may not get you, and it's, I mean, let's be realistic. It's That's a real tough place to be. what eudaimonia, good life, really says is that regardless of challenges, that you're still going to be able to find gratitude in the moment. And I would say gratitude is another, like,
Mm.
on top of positivity, is that and again, that aligns with positivity, because when you're grateful, you're obviously far more positive. But when you're going through a challenge, if you can live a life in such a way to where even the challenges don't pull you back in a negative space for too long or whatever, that eudaimonic kind of well-being, that good life. I just think it just goes beyond positivity, if that makes sense. That it's more joy regardless of circumstance. Like, you go to South America or some third world country, not, there's a lot of great places in South America, but there's some places that might be really poor, or wherever that is in the world, some of the happiest people, most joyful people. Yeah, and I don't know. I think it took a lot more than positivity for them to get there.
Do you think that at the end of the day, the thing that we're all trying to divide, multiply so that we can actually get to a divisible of one, is it the word that we're actually trying to go towards, Aaron, is just this underlying love? I mean, is that, I mean, you're like, you bring positivity, and then we're bringing it up. Now we got the you don't me
Eudaimonia, I know it's a technical term, but it's just joy. Just think of joy.
joy, like, and you got gratitude, right? And presence. And it seems like these are all these sort of offshoots of like the root word, like this root word.
Yeah, of love. We could just love deeper, with meaning, and lead with it, right? I mean, when I say lead with it, I'm talking not business necessarily. I'm just talking we're leading with love. No, I get that. That does make a lot of sense. That's a great way to a foundational. If you think of a building and then the foundation of it, without love, joy is not possible. You know, gratitude is not possible. They all kind of, it could also be drawn as a cycle, right? Or like all these things just kind of impacting each other. I don't know, but it's
Yeah. But I think in the same thing, I think people want to get there and then they want to stay there and they want to be locked in there. And I actually, I think that there's a healthiness of having like the day night cycle. And I think that when you go through the cycle, what you just talked about, it's like these seasons where you have these moments. I think about my daughter just turned 4 today, and I'm remembering the first time I got to hold her. Now, again, granted, I was 39 versus 26 when I had my first, and so I had some context, I had some like some water under the bridge. But I remember that just feeling like Christmas morning, as early as I can remember the feeling of Christmas morning as a kid, and just pure unadulterated, just like joy. And as much as I would love to say that I can keep in that moment, and that I can continue to keep like that, just that sentiment inside me, um, I have found great meaning on the flip side of that when holding Benny after he had died. And but I think that there's something, though, it's about, you have, like, love is not just staying in that moment. I think love is actually being in the game.
yeah, yeah. I'm feeling it, man. I think about those moments, like my 6 kids, uh, the births of those children, um, the spiritual side of that for me, right? And yeah, that depth of love, if you could just bottle that up, right? And then the flip side with Benny, I just think that's so powerful. Think about the time my grandfather passed away, he was my best friend, um, and how much love was in that room, right? And that's where the joy, right? Is that joy can be found on both, in a real challenge in situation that you that's such a great example, Ben, that I just love that you, and I yeah, just love that you shared that and that you come back to that moment, I'm sure, quite often where you're reminded of the feeling that you had, the love that you have for Benny still
Yes.
is and what else, I mean, I know there's a lot of things in life that we put a lot of emphasis on and we prioritize and we think this is really important. I think as entrepreneurs, the money gets in the way sometimes, oftentimes, that it distorts, it blinds us from connecting in ways and feeling that love. Because when you feel it, like in those moments, you're reminded, and you wish you could always remember that you're reminded that there's only a few things in life that truly, truly matter, and that love is at the center of it. That is so good.
And going back to your that study, relationships, almost every single thing that I have where I have one of those moments, as Dan Martell would call them, in the pocket moments. So it's in the pocket, such a good imagery. It's usually with, and if I'm by myself, it makes me think of someone else or another memory that brings me back to that sweet that sweet moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and, thinking about my own parents, my dad is turning 80 this year, and time they don't live too far from me, and I take it for granted. I mean, it's you just have to, like, you don't have those people around forever, and it's business, all those things will be there when you get back, and or when you, spend a little bit of time maybe that you wouldn't have otherwise, but, and then those things give you energy. I mean, back in 2016, I invested. I mean, if there was one investment I made that made changed everything for me, it was my investment in my relationships. Secondary, my health, but my relationships is what changed everything for me. I mean, not even a close second, because I put so much more priority in reconnecting with my most important relationships, and I'm still working on it. Like, sometimes I'm off kilter, sometimes I'm not my priorities become skewed and disorganized. We just have to be self-aware of that and reconnect.
Yeah. One of our mutual peers, Lee Brower, who's also an associate coach at Strategic Coach, and he has this he has this quote that I think is so poignant. He says, "The enemy of thriving is arriving." And so often when you read these self-help books, you read these like, hey, be abundant, be more self-aware, like invest in relationships. I think we all assume that we're going to get there. And I can't tell if it's maturity or it's just me surrendering to the falling in love with the process of just trying to be present, making the commitment that I'm going to be committed to that process. It's not about ever getting there. So Aaron, I say that because I love you saying like, hey, yeah, in 16, this was my greatest investment and I'm still not there. And so I'm curious, like, do you wanna get there? I mean, like, whatever there is.
Yeah, we've learned, and Lee's quote says it all, is that there is not a there, or shouldn't be. Maybe there is a there, and that's where, like, when you arrive, what else? I think I got a taste of that when I exited in 2020. I thought I was there, right? And that no, fortunately, COVID hit. I think that helped me. I was forced. We were all in the same house and we could go nowhere, and that was a blessing. I don't know, for me personally, I know it was not a blessing for many, and I don't wanna play that down that way, but for me, it forced me to maybe not have the repercussions of arriving back then. But I did have some of it, and it you know what arriving does, I think, more than anything? It creates complacency.
Ooh,
Like
yes.
I became complacent. I especially arriving when you have maybe the financial means to take care of your family for the long term, that you get this mental just blinders on, and I've learned that there's no joy in that, and
Yeah.
that there's no joy in a and I know this sounds trite and it sounds like, but and because some people will say, well, that's easier for you to say when you have money, but it's not the bank account. What's in there, is like it is it is hedonic happiness, honestly. And it's not it's dangerous, and it creates complacency. It took me a while, and I've talked to I think you and I have had this conversation where I went into this complacent mode for a couple years where I just was not creating anything new really. I would invested in some companies and had done some things that way, but I really was not myself. And I had slid a little bit, and that's when I refound positive psychology, got into the program, and it was a reset for me.
Well, it seems like complacency is the arch enemy of creativity. And if creativity is the ultimate like node connector to connection,
Definitely one of the keynotes to creation, because some
yeah.
of my most creative acts or things I've created definitely has not been me from start to finish. There's usually
Mhm.
a lot of people in the process, or
Yeah.
a handful. So, yeah,
Yeah. Well, hey, Aaron, I want to thank you for coming on today.
been fun.
I got to tell you, an hour and 50 minutes has just flown by. And so thank you for creating that good life connection and just and sharing so generously with all of just the knowledge and just the excitement and passion. You can just tell when you're talking about these things that there's a curiosity that just is really deep.
I appreciate that. Same to you, Ben.
Oh, well, thank you. If people want to know more about you, like your book, your program, your socials, like where can they find more of Aaron?
Yeah, you can go to my website, aaronmarcum.com. Two A's, Aaron is my, first name, and Marcum, Marcum, is in Mike. And then breakaway365.com is our coaching program that, we do a lot for the home care industry, but visit us there, and then the Guiding Truths AI is on that Breakaway site. So, and I believe I know that I'm pretty sure there's a link on my own site, but yeah, aaronmarkham.com for the book, and you can get to both sites, depending, you can go to either.
Yeah, in the book title,
Entre Thrive, so entrepreneurial thriving, so ENTRE, thrive.
quick 2-minute blurb of if someone chooses to read that, what are they going to come away with?
So, I mean, the subtitle, The Entrepreneur's Eight Laws to Accelerating Financial Freedom. My mouth is cotton after an hour and fifty minutes while creating the good life. So I use the term the good life in there. So financial freedom with the good life. And I go over these eight laws like clarity, creativity, what we talked about, grit, connections. I have a chapter dedicated to faith in oneself, faith in others, and faith in a higher power. In that chapter, I talk about vitality. That's one of the laws, or vigor, really. I use the term vigor. And then agency actually is the eighth law, which is a real powerful concept that I dive into about entrepreneurial agency and how that ties to the good life, and how creating that for themselves and their business and the people that work with them um, can help everyone, create that good life. So it's a great book, bestseller on Amazon, and so I'm really proud of it.
Really good book. Should check it out. Aaron, one of the things I like to do with my guests is give them the last word, the last phrase. What's the ripple you want to create?
I think for entrepreneurs, are speaking to their own good life and identifying that is getting really clear on, we call them breakaways, but really clear on their breakaways, where they want to break away to, and Once they're clear on that and what the good life means to them, and it's like the good life breakaway, if you could call it, then again, the crawl, walk, run, fly. I just like to leave that as like, okay, what needs to happen right now? How do I start this? And just get started.
Amen. Aaron, thanks for showing up so generously today. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. So thank you.
Been fun. Thank you, Ben. Same. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.